When my mother died, I felt as if the very ground beneath me crumbled. I wasn't prepared for the void she left behind, the weight of her absence pressing down on me like a boulder I couldn't shake. It's hard to describe that feeling of waking up in a world where someone who has always been there suddenly isn't. I used to think that grief was something you got over, that you moved through it like a tunnel and eventually emerged on the other side. But what I've come to realize is that grief doesn't leave, you just learn to live with it, like a shadow that follows you no matter where you go. The days immediately after her passing were a blur. My house was filled with people, friends, family, neighbors offering condolences, but I couldn't feel anything beyond a cold, numbing silence inside me. I smiled politely, hugged people back, thanked them for their prayers, but inside, I was hollow. I found myself in autopilot mode, doing what was expected of me, but my mind was a million miles away. I was searching for her, listening for the sound of her voice, hoping that somehow this was all a terrible dream. Nights were the hardest. It was in the quiet of the night that the loss became unbearable. I would lie in bed and close my eyes, only to be met with vivid memories of her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she told a story, the warmth of her hand on mine. Then the cold realization would hit me, and I would cry until there were no tears left. I would sit up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, feeling like I was drowning in a sea of sorrow. There was no escape. It was like a thick fog that clouded my mind and suffocated my spirit. The first few months passed in this haze. I lost all sense of time. Days blended into weeks, and weeks into months. I went through the motions, work, errands, trying to keep up appearances, but nothing felt real. I withdrew from friends. I stopped answering calls and texts. It felt easier to isolate myself than to pretend everything was okay when it wasn't. I felt guilty for not being able to snap out of it, ashamed that I couldn't just move on the way people subtly seemed to expect. One day, I found myself at my mother's old house, the one she had lived in for most of her life. Everything in it still felt like her, the smell of her perfume in the bedroom, her favorite mug sitting by the sink, the blanket she used to wrap herself in while watching TV. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, not knowing if I could walk through the rooms without breaking down. But then something strange happened. Instead of pain, I felt a surge of warmth. I could almost hear her voice in my head, telling me that it was okay to let go, that it was okay to move forward. That day was a turning point. It was when I realized that grief wasn't about holding on to the person you lost. It was about holding on to yourself in the midst of that loss. I hadn't just lost my mother, I had lost myself in the process. I had become so consumed by the void she left that I had forgotten how to be whole without her. And that was when I knew I had to find a way to rebuild. The journey wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I started therapy, which felt like ripping open wounds I had been desperately trying to cover. Every session, I was forced to confront the pain, to sit with it, and to let it wash over me. There were times I wanted to quit, to run away from the overwhelming emotions that bubbled up. But deep down, I knew that if I didn't face the storm, I would never heal. There were days when I would go for long walks, just to clear my head, and I would find myself crying in the middle of a park or on a street corner, wondering if this was what my life would always be, marked by an unshakable sadness. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. I found small moments of peace, tiny pockets of joy that reminded me that life still existed outside of grief. I began reconnecting with friends, going out for coffee, allowing myself to laugh again without feeling guilty. Resilience, I learned, isn't about being strong all the time. It's about being willing to bend, to break, and then to rebuild. It's about finding the courage to keep going, even when you feel like you've been shattered into a million pieces. And that's exactly how I felt, broken, scattered, but determined to put myself back together again. Self-discovery came in waves, often in the quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts. I started journaling, trying to make sense of who I was without my mother. I had spent so much of my life defining myself through her expectations, her dreams for me, her presence, that I hadn't really taken the time to understand who I was on my own. What did I want? What were my passions, my fears, my desires? These were questions I had avoided for so long, but in the aftermath of her death, I had no choice but to confront them. I learned that self-discovery isn't always a grand, epiphany-filled journey. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. It's in the small decisions you make every day, choosing to take care of yourself, to prioritize your mental health, to let go of the guilt that comes with moving forward. I began to realize that I didn't need to have all the answers right away. It was okay to be a work in progress, to not have everything figured out. There were moments of clarity, like when I realized that my mother's strength lived on in me, that the resilience I needed to get through this was something she had instilled in me all along. And there were moments of confusion, like when I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about life and death, about purpose and meaning. But through it all, I kept moving forward, one step at a time. It's been years now since I lost her, and while the pain has softened, it has never completely disappeared. But I've learned to carry it with me, not as a burden, but as a part of who I am. Her absence has shaped me, yes, but it has also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, about the power of healing, and about the importance of self-discovery. I still visit her house sometimes, sitting quietly in her old rocking chair, feeling her presence in the stillness of the room. I talk to her sometimes, not out loud, but in my heart. I tell her about the things I've learned, about the ways I've grown, and about the woman I've become without her by my side. And I like to think that somewhere, somehow, she's proud of me, not just for surviving, but for finding myself in the process. Grief changes you. It breaks you open in ways you never thought possible. But it also gives you the opportunity to rebuild, to rediscover, and to come out the other side stronger, more resilient, and more whole. And that's the greatest gift my mother ever gave me, the strength to keep going, even in the face of unimaginable loss. After months of feeling like I was stuck in a deep pit of grief, I knew something had to change. The weight of my loss had become too heavy to carry alone, and I was barely getting through my days. There were moments when I questioned everything, my strength, my ability to recover, even my will to keep going. But somewhere in the depths of my despair, there was a small flicker of hope, a voice that whispered that I deserved to heal. That maybe, just maybe, I could find a way out of this darkness. I decided to reach out for help. At first, it felt like admitting defeat, as if by seeking therapy, I was somehow acknowledging that I wasn't strong enough to handle this on my own. But that was the first of many lessons I would learn. Seeking help doesn't make you weak. In fact, it takes tremendous strength to admit that you can't do it all on your own. My first therapy session was both overwhelming and cathartic. I remember sitting on the couch, feeling the lump in my throat as I tried to talk about my mother. The words wouldn't come at first. It was as if saying them out loud would make the loss even more real. But my therapist was patient, giving me space to grieve, to stumble over my thoughts, to let the emotions flow without judgment. She gently encouraged me to confront the pain rather than run from it, to face the feelings I had been avoiding for so long. Those early sessions were hard. I won't lie, there were times when I wanted to quit. The pain was so raw, so overwhelming that I wasn't sure if I could handle it. But I kept going. Slowly, I began to unravel the layers of my grief, peeling back the numbness I had been living in. It wasn't just about losing my mother, it was about losing the part of me that had always been defined by her presence. I had to rediscover who I was without her, and that process was as painful as it was necessary. One of the turning points in my therapy came when we started talking about acceptance, not in the sense of forgetting or moving on, but in learning to live alongside the loss. My therapist explained that grief doesn't have a timeline and it doesn't follow a neat, linear path. Some days, I would feel okay, and other days, the pain would hit me like a tidal wave. And that was normal. There's no right way to grieve, no set of rules I had to follow. I had to give myself permission to feel everything, the sadness, the anger, the confusion, without trying to rush through it. We also worked on practical coping strategies, small steps I could take to rebuild my life. I started journaling every day, writing down my thoughts and emotions, no matter how messy or incoherent they seemed. It became a way for me to release the pent-up feelings I had been holding on to. Some days, my journal was filled with pages of sadness and longing, and other days, I wrote about the memories that made me smile. But no matter what I wrote, it was a release, a way to put my grief into words rather than carrying it silently inside me. I also began to practice mindfulness, something I had never really considered before. At first, the idea of sitting still and focusing on my breath seemed impossible. My mind was constantly racing, filled with thoughts of what I had lost and the future I was terrified of facing. But over time, mindfulness became a way for me to anchor myself in the present. It didn't take away the pain, but it gave me a moment of peace in the midst of the chaos. I learned to breathe through the difficult emotions, to let them come and go without holding on to them too tightly. As time passed, I began to reconnect with the world around me. I took up painting, something I hadn't done since I was a child. There was something soothing about the way the colors blended on the canvas, the way I could lose myself in the process. It didn't matter if the end result was beautiful or not, it was the act of creating that brought me comfort. It reminded me that life could still hold beauty, even in the midst of loss. I also leaned on the people around me, something I had been reluctant to do at first. I had always been the one who took care of others, the one who was strong and independent. But in my grief, I learned that it was okay to let others take care of me. My friends and family became my lifeline, offering support when I didn't even know I needed it. They didn't always have the right words to say, and sometimes they said things that stung, but their presence was enough. I wasn't alone, even though it often felt like I was. And then, one day, I stumbled upon a book that changed everything. I had been browsing through a small bookstore in my neighborhood, looking for something, anything, that might offer a glimmer of hope. That's when I found it, Resilience and Self-Discovery After Loss. The title jumped out at me, as if it was speaking directly to my heart. I picked it up, flipping through the pages, and immediately felt a connection to the words inside. It was as if the author knew exactly what I had been going through, as if they had walked the same path of grief and healing. I bought the book that day, and over the next few weeks, it became my guide, my companion through the darkest moments of my journey. The steps outlined in the book weren't just theoretical, they were practical, actionable things I could do to rebuild my life. It wasn't about erasing the pain or forgetting what I had lost. It was about learning to live again, even in the shadow of that loss. One of the most powerful lessons I learned from the book was the importance of self-compassion. I had been so hard on myself, constantly feeling like I wasn't healing fast enough, like I should be over it by now. But the book reminded me that healing isn't a race. It's a process, one that unfolds in its own time. I began to treat myself with more kindness, to give myself the space to grieve without judgment. The book also introduced me to the concept of post-traumatic growth, the idea that we can not only recover from loss, but that we can emerge from it stronger, more resilient, and with a deeper understanding of ourselves. It gave me hope that there was light at the end of this tunnel, even if I couldn't see it yet. I started incorporating the exercises from the book into my daily routine, practicing gratitude, setting small goals, and finding ways to reconnect with the things that brought me joy. Slowly but surely, I began to feel the weight of my grief lift. I wasn't cured, but I was healing. I was rediscovering who I was, not just in the context of my loss, but in the context of my life moving forward. Looking back now, I can see how far I've come. I'm not the same person I was before my mother's death, and I never will be. But in many ways, I've grown stronger. I've learned what it means to be resilient, not in the absence of pain, but in the ability to move through it. I've discovered parts of myself I didn't even know existed, and I've come to realize that life, even after loss, can still be beautiful. If you're watching this and you're struggling like I did, I want you to know that you're not alone. There is hope, even when it feels like there isn't. And if you're looking for a guide, a lifeline to help you through the darkness, I can't recommend resilience and self-discovery after loss enough. It was a game changer for me, a step-by-step roadmap that helped me transform my grief into growth. The practices in this book gave me the tools I needed to rebuild my life, and I believe it can do the same for you. If you're ready to take that first step towards healing, grab a copy. It might just change everything for you, the way it did for me.